And we are live from Midas Letter Live. I'm not James. I'm Brandon. And I'll be co-hosting with Sir Uncle Ed off the side.
Uncle Ed, Mr. Ed, Ed the Head.
We got like 5 names for you. 6 names, 7. We'll keep going.
Edify, education. Ooh. How you doing?
Doing well. Are you going to educate us tonight? I hope so.
You know what? We had a pretty bad day in the S&P today.
Terrible.
But it's had a run of the highest order. Like it, I think it's outperformed most people's expectations after that meltdown in December.
Yeah, did you hear the stats on that? I said it on our show yesterday on FTMIG. We were going over specifically the S&P 500 and the Dow and how it's been coming up. And it's amazing that in December, it had the worst month since 2008. And then Boxing Day was the best Boxing Day, like the single most points increase of the that's the Dow, not the S&P 500 in one day. Yeah. But then we turned around and had the best January since 1987.
Yeah, and I think
that's a drastic change.
They're saying that the drop off was as vicious as anything they've seen since the 30s, like 90 years, really? 80 years. Like this was there's a couple of guys that write about this, and they're pretty smart guys, and they look at how many. I think there was 2 days in a very short period of time where more than 90% of the issues traded were up. Like, so there was like 9-to-1 upside versus up versus down, and that happened twice. And they say that is so rare, like so powerful, that like it was like everything's on sale and people are scaling in. There's some smart guys saying this market's got a long way to go yet to the upside.
Yep.
I'm not so sure. I know gold. We saw gold up a good, I'd say 10% in the last 4 or 5 months, and the TSX Venture, which has been decimated, it's up 18% off the bottom. But the bottom is low. Yeah. But that's how it starts, right? It starts somewhere.
Yes. And it was really interesting. I had Chris Arthur on. I was talking to him recently. He's one of the guys. He's a fund manager for Wealthsimple. So we were talking to him. He said a stat. I'm going to get this wrong. I know it, and I'll watch back on our show later, and I'll remember what exactly it was. But basically, he was stating when in December you're having a red December, the first 5 days of January are green, and then the rest of January is green.
It sets up the whole year.
27 of 30 times that's happened. It's been a good year.
I've read that.
What a like, we're going to TSN stats now. If you don't know that reference, on a cloudy day on Wednesday on this city, this quarterback.
How goes January goes the year.
Yeah,
and we've had an epic January.
27 of 30 times. 27 of 30 times.
It's interesting, but volatility is certainly back. Like today, I think at one point the S&P was down 42 or 3 points or something like that, and then what is it? I think is it about 7 S&P points for one, or 7 Dow points? It's 7 to 1 or something like that. So Dow's probably down 300 at one point, I would guess.
Something like that. But before we do that, let's tell everybody what we're going to be covering today.
Okay, good.
As we look outside, there's lots of clouds. We're going with the headline news that's coming up as soon as I start talking. And then we're going to be having Giadha come on the show, and also the CEO of That Is Incorrect. But she's going to be coming on the show for ourselves as well. We've got a Weed Stocks 101 coming up. That's a really cool little segment that we're going to be having. We've got Ben Smith, capital markets writer. If you know about Midas Letter, you know about Ben Smith. He's coming on. We're talking about a few things. You got the market close with charts and analysis, and then Jason Zandberg, special situations analyst specifically in the cannabis sector, will be coming on as well. So we got a couple of things throughout today. Yeah, it's going to be a good show.
Okay, look forward to it.
But first, before we keep talking,
can I watch?
You can. We're going to the news.
Okay.
Thanks, Brendan. And here are the headlines moving markets today. Canopy Growth Corporation announced that it intends to increase its total investment in Canopy Rivers by 30 million Canadian dollars. The investment will be made through a private placement of subordinated voting shares in the capital of Canopy Rivers, concurrent with Canopy Rivers' bought deal offering of subordinate voting shares for gross proceeds of approximately $55 million. This investment is being co-led by CIBC Capital Markets and 8 Capital and is expected to close on or about February 27, 2019. Wayland Group announced that it has received both Good Manufacturing Practices and Good Distribution Practices certifications from the national authority in the state of Saxony for the company's Ebersbach facility in Germany. These certifications are for a 50,000 square foot area within Wayland's much larger facility located just outside of Dresden, Germany. This marks Wayland's second facility to receive the EU GMP certification, the highest standard of pharmaceutical production in the world. Green Growth Brands has stated it's not backing away from their Aphria takeover bid. This is in response to Afria's board of directors' rejection of GGB's offer to acquire all of the issued and outstanding common shares of Aphria. GGB says its offer is one way to combine these businesses across borders while creating significant value for shareholders of both companies. Cinaport Acquisition Corp has received conditional approval from the TSX Venture Exchange for its proposed qualifying transaction with Fire and Flower Inc. Zias Life Sciences Inc. and Up Cannabis Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of New Strike Brands Limited, announced that they have entered into a definitive supply agreement for Zias to purchase dried bulk cannabis from Up Cannabis. FSD Pharma Inc. has terminated its newly hired Chief Executive Officer, Rupert Hayes. The company has announced that its board of directors has concluded a strategic assessment of the company and has implemented changes in leadership and business practices to optimize operations. Dr. Raza Bokhari, executive co-chairman, has been appointed interim Chief Executive Officer of FSD Pharma effective immediately. The company also announced that it has completed a strategic investment of $1.5 million in PharmaStrip Corp. and signed a definitive collaboration and profit-sharing agreement with the company, effective January 23, 2019. Under the terms of the agreement, FSD will install PharmaStrip proprietary equipment and will use the equipment to manufacture organic medical cannabis-infused oral thin film strips. Auxly Cannabis Group announced the termination of the definitive agreement dated March 3, 2018 with FV Pharma Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of FSD Pharma Inc., which was governing the joint venture between the parties. The joint venture was formed with the intention of developing a portion of FSD Pharma's cannabis cultivation facility located in Cobourg, Ontario, in mutually agreed upon stages. To date, the company has invested $7.5 million in the development and construction of the JV facility. MedMed Enterprises Inc. has completed the sale of 3 properties to Treehouse Real Estate Investment with a net proceed of approximately $18.4 million. Properties included in the sale are 1 retail storefront located in Venice, California, 1 retail storefront located near Beverly Hills, and 1 45,000 square foot cultivation and production factory located in Sparks, Nevada. GGB Beauty LLC, a subsidiary of Green Growth Brands Inc., has executed a licensing agreement as of February 6, 2019 with Authentic Brands Group and the Greg Norman brand. The agreement is to develop a line of CBD-infused personal care products designed for active adult men and women. As part of this arrangement, the company will be working with Tilray as the preferred supplier of the CBD ingredients to be used in these products. The Supreme Cannabis Company announced that the company's wholly owned subsidiary, 7 Acres, has entered into a supply agreement with the New Brunswick Liquor Corporation to supply recreational cannabis to its retail stores, and has also been registered as a supplier in the province of Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan and New Brunswick become 7 Acres' 7th and 8th provincial partners, alongside British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, Nova Scotia, and PEI. Tilray Inc. announced the expansion of its global senior leadership team with the appointment of Sasha Mielkarek as Managing Director for Europe. Mielkarek comes to Tilray with over 18 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry in international markets such as the US, Europe, and Latin America. Most recently, Mielkarek was at Grunenthal as Global Head of the Gout Business Unit and Alliance Implementation Lead. And that's your news for today.
And thank you very much for that, Ricky. There was a lot to go through there.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many news releases are starting to flow. And you and I were talking about this earlier, and we're having Ben come on later on this afternoon. This is what we're going to be talking about as well, is that we're finding that a lot of people just skim through them now because we're so used to these things. We used to see someone like Supreme today, Supreme Pharmaceutical or Supreme Cannabis Company, I'm using their old name, they came out saying they're now in 8 provinces. So they have a larger supply area now. But their stock is up, I think, 1.5%. Remember when they first started coming up? Oh, someone got an Ontario license. Boom, 50%.
A lot of this is like relationships between people, right? At first, it's always great. Everybody's happy, blah, blah, blah. As time goes on, maybe there's a little hair there, whatever. And look, we saw a relationship bust up today between Oxley and
Oxley and FSD Pharma. Yeah, that's actually a very, very material change, I think, because
who do you think it's more important to FSD probably, right?
I would personally take it more important to FSD Pharma, because when it comes to
Oxley has a lot of cash.
Oxley, they have a lot of cash. They already have multiple streams of revenue that'll be coming in from the different partnerships. And yes, they did put $7 million in, but in business, sometimes you put capital into something.
So what was the reason? They cite reasons?
They did. So they cited the fact that there was a breach of contract due to certain personnel obligations not being met. That could be anything. That could be maybe they didn't have a master grower in time. Maybe they didn't have a certain CFO.
Right.
That's kept ambiguous. But then there's one part. I'm going to go to the actual article.
And they got some building in Coburg or something like that, right? They've
got numerous different places, but here's the wording I wanted to really focus on.
Yeah.
When they came out with that article, they were stating the part about staffing obligations. That's all they said. But here's the part that I find significant. It says, as well as significant concerns regarding certain aspect of the building's infrastructure. That's the area. I don't know if you'll see when I highlight this.
So are they talking about the integrity of the building? Like, are they talking about?
It sounds like the integrity of the building.
Yeah.
It sounds like the integrity. And
they spent a lot of money trying to get that building in the right order too, haven't they?
They put $7 million into it, but they've obviously decided they did a risk assessment and decided that it was.
I'm going to put up
going through with it.
I'm going to put out Oxley stock here.
So yeah, no, I think that for Oxley, they now go on to another area. They still have plenty of cash to be
Oxley's got
in different areas.
They got a lot of money.
This is a setback for Oxley. I think this could be a little bit more material for FSD Pharma, but
Oxley's down.
They got other things on the go as well.
Let's put up the chart here on Oxley. Oxley's down 6 cents. Like this is a okay. Oxley's down 6 cents, well through the Bollinger Band. This is a bit of a breakdown here. And volume, 4 million shares. And I'll quickly put up, I'm going to figure out how to put two charts up at once at some point here when I...
And while you're in the chart, to Jonathan Johnson, where did my MPX stock go? It went into Ian. Go look into your portfolio. You probably have shares of Ian and MPXI.
Yeah.
MPX stock trading.
Huge is CNX as well, I would think. Yeah. Well, Huge got pounded too.
Yeah, and I suspect that.
Look at this, 31 million shares, got down to 27.5 or 27 cents.
Is that their all-time high in volume? I don't think so.
No. If you go back,
they did way more than that, right?
Like I'll put up the.
That's one thing. Liquidity is not an issue for this company.
Look at the back in here.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's remember when they were talking about they were setting records for all-time volume.
Yeah. Now,
look at that.
Yeah,
wow.
they told
it's a bump up here in the last 3 months, but nowhere near there. And this is a case where if this thing rolls over a bit, and maybe it's going to back and fill a little bit, but maybe.
Yeah. See, what's dangerous about that? Can you put your chart back up? What's dangerous about that? So you see right around 2019 when it first began.
Is it 3 month?
Yeah, go 3 months because it'll still show what I'm talking about.
Okay.
You see how we broke the Bollinger Bands going up, and that's actually a really strong,
right here,
fantastic break. Yeah, you want to be buying on that. That's a fantastic break. It's breaking out the Bollinger Bands. Lots of volume is kicked in, but look what it's just done. If you can get rid of those there on the very right-hand side, it broke the Bollinger Bands aggressively on volume. Isn't that normally a very bearish sign?
There's usually a back and fill because you break through. It means that it's outside its sort of probability range, and then it pulls back, and then it should carry on. And if it doesn't, like in this case, it's. I don't think I'd step into this. Yeah. I don't step into this because I think
not for a trade. You're not looking for a trade on it
right now. And I could be wrong. Again, this has got nothing to do with the company. This is just trying to analyze the chart pattern.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things you got to keep, and there's a lot of news that came up. People can miss that, and then they look at their portfolio and wonder why something is really beaten up or why something has risen really quickly. You've got to, if you're in these high-flying stocks, and even the more safer bets, and your Canopy and Aurora, and even there's a lot of volatility. You have to keep paying attention. If you don't want to pay attention or you can't pay attention, I don't know if you should be investing in cannabis stocks. It's a lot riskier because something can happen like this.
And you know, like as time goes on, you know, we're starting to see like relationships sour. You know, we had the thing with Namaste with
Sean Dollinger.
You know, like in other words, all's not well.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be well, but as time goes on, like what familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah. I really have a different viewpoint on the cannabis space. You know, we've spoken many times.
Like to now then, as opposed to say 6-9 months ago?
Even years ago, but especially 6-9 months ago, where you're starting to see so many different cannabis companies come into play.
Yeah.
Where it's very hard to keep track of all of them. That's one thing. That's a sign of oversaturation. I think John
McMahon shares an office here. He's saying there's like how many new issuers have come out in the last?
It's ridiculous.
So how do you like? That's dilution in effect, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because you're diluting. You only have so many people who want to invest in cannabis stocks. And if there were 10 stocks, like I remember the day when it was just like, you know, it was Canopy, it was Supreme Pharmaceuticals, it was Aphria, it was Aurora, it was Bedrocan.
Good point.
That's all that capital's going to here. So yes, we're broadening our capital and who's able to go into like banks and things like that. But at the end of the day, how many people can keep going into a new private placement, who can keep going into buy the dip and compete? It's traders. Most people who are investing, they're content. So if you keep adding dozens a month, which it feels like, I know it's not that much, but it feels like that, you're going to have a point where now these companies that could have had a good news release that 6 months ago, a year ago, you heard that news release, it would have been through the roof. Now it's people will read it, scroll it, okay, cool, and just keep going on. So it's a dangerous time right now. I think we're going to really see the good companies who are good promoters and marketers. There's nothing wrong with promoting and marketing. It's just how you do it. Those companies are going to start really just keeping up.
Chiron, there's an example. There's Chiron. They just raised. They came out with a relatively small market cap. They seem to be doing things the right way. They wanted to raise $20 million. They got 25. They didn't give a warrant, and it's free trading stock, and the stock's at a premium. So there are winners, and there's a lot of companies that would like to be winners.
Yeah, and you know how we measure those winners? Numbers, analytics. We got to measure them.
Yeah.
That's a perfect segue into who we're talking to because it's exactly what she's been doing for years now. So joining us all the way from Washington, Giadha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure how, when they finally cued in the microphone there, I hope you heard the segue because that was perfect to what we were just talking about, is that a lot of people right now are seeing so many different, no, it hadn't. But we're speaking about so many different players right now, and there's so much going on in the Canadian landscape, in the United States and abroad, but there aren't many people out there doing a good job of measuring that. And New Frontier Data, that's something where you specialize in.
Indeed, it was quite the perfect segue. And I was listening to this segment, very interesting. I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying. The market is certainly getting very crowded. But yeah, so New Frontier Data, we're a big data company. We cover solely the cannabis industry globally. We're a bunch of data geeks, and we provide very objective, we do not take a position in any way, intelligence in the cannabis sector.
Absolutely, and that's needed. It really, really is, because there's too many people guessing. There's too many people going with speculation and all of that. And you know, when you're looking at these larger banks and these larger companies who actually see this as a legitimate sector that has been coming out of what has been in prohibition for many, many years, a lot of these people who thought this was a flashy thing to get into, they're going to start fading, and real companies are going to start moving forward. And I can imagine you're going to be tracking who those people are going to be.
Indeed, absolutely. In fact, funny enough, you were asking how many companies are currently publicly traded. We just launched on our platform, which is called Equio. Actually means from the horse's mouth, which I think is cheeky. But our platform currently has an index that tracks every single publicly traded company in both the US and Canada, and as well as the volatility. Think of Yahoo Finance for cannabis. Most of the interest we're getting from our audience, which tends to be investors, financial institutions, the Bloombergs of the world from more enterprise level, they really want to get more visibility, but quant-based, fact-based visibility on what's truly happening in this sector that is now global. There are over 60 nations around the world that are either decriminalizing or legalizing cannabis today. That's a pretty big number.
Wow.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating how quickly this is growing, and it's debatable, but a lot of people were looking at the federal government of Canada, and just the fact that when C-45 went through, it was the fact that a large G20 nation had actually approved it. And you can really start seeing the domino effect happen. It's already been happening throughout the states for a long time, but state by state. But you can really start seeing, Germany's coming on board, South Africa is coming on board, Australia, Israel's been on board for a long time. You're really starting to see this domino effect saying, hey, well, if the rest of the developed world is doing it, well, we don't want to be left behind. And they're seeing the benefits. What kind of trend are you really finding to saying, that's something that you need to watch out for in a good way?
You actually nailed it, and you named all the nations we're tracking very closely. Australia is actually going to be the next nation that legalizes both medical and adult use nationally. So it will be very interesting to track. But in terms of trends that we're seeing, little anecdote, Mexico is looking to legalize all drugs, not just cannabis. So that should be interesting as well. But we're beginning to see a regional ecosystem, and we're also beginning to see a race to dominate the export world, specifically in all things hemp and CBD related. And as I'm sure you know, hemp, CBD, non-psychotropic, we're beginning to see the diversion between the cannabis industry and the hemp industry. But I would say the rest of the world outside of North America is truly hemp-centric. Because most of the legalization is occurring around the medicinal applications of the plant. And as we see Europe emerging as a very large consumer base and patient base, we're now seeing countries like Canada, Mexico, Colombia looking to position to be their main import. So certainly a true global race, which you would have asked me 4 years ago, and as much as we predict and accurately, I honestly would have not been able to predict this.
Yeah, and it truly is remarkable how fast this has taken place. And I think a lot of it is stemming from, there's a lot of documentaries that have been coming out over the last 2 to 4 years showing that these medical patients who are absolutely decimated through cancer or other means, and they're on different types of dopamines, they're on Percocets, they're on all these different methadone, and they're seeing real cases of people turning to cannabis. And it's not always that cannabis is going to magically cure you, but it's amazing how many cases are being solved, or at least they're turning to cannabis as a alternative. And a lot of these doctors saying, well, you know what, if this is working, I'm at least open to seeing more information on it. I think there's also an arms race, if you want to call it that, into finding out what strains are used for what different illnesses, for what different people, because it's so convoluted that every time I try looking into it a little bit more, I realize how much I don't know. So it's an interesting area where that's going to go on the medical side specifically.
In fact, interesting that you mentioned that. So at New Frontier Data, we sort of, because we're a big data company, we're sort of obligated, right, to cover every quant area, anything from regulatory to taxation to consumer behavior to transaction information. I mean, truly anything we need to give you a macroeconomic view. The most challenging area for us today in which to collect information to then report it has been precisely what you just noted. It's sort of anything to do with dosage, anything to do with association of strain with symptoms. And sadly, it's because we lack standards. And that is true of all nations today. There is absolutely no standard around dosage. There's also literally no standard around nomenclature of strains. So as an information provider, as a super data geek, I certainly hope that changes soon, because I don't see how the research is going to advance without it. And I certainly don't see how we're going to continue to have positive impact to patients without truly understanding that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually at a conference very recently where they were talking about big data in cannabis specifically, and specifically on the medical side, where they're really starting to see a lot more research being done, especially when it comes to an actual plant. I mean, you can grow 1,500 plants, and even if you did everything perfect, there's going to be a different DNA compound, a different chemical compound of all those 1,500 plants. But when you start extracting it and you start putting it into certain cannabinoids or formulas, you're now having a substance or a material that you're able to say, okay, this is this strain or this cannabinoid, and you can start doing more tests that way. From your side of things, where does New Frontier data come in helping either these aspects of trying to record all the different strains and how it's being used, but more specifically, if a cannabis company is saying, hey, I need data, who do I turn to? It's sounding like you're one of the go-to people. What would you do at that point? How does New Frontier data get involved?
So a couple of things. So most of our clients are, as I mentioned, folks in the financial sort of sector, investors and so on and so forth. But from an operating side, the way that we work with operators, whether it's cultivators, processors, retailers, distributors, many of them want to understand what their data means to them and their clients. And as a big data firm, we have the infrastructure to ingest the information, normalize it, and then activate it, right? We sometimes can even help them monetize it. And then we aggregate all of that to continue to report on whether it is nationally on a global scale. Most of our reports, by the way, are free, which is how we give back to the industry. So that's sort of how we help companies set up an infrastructure so they can, again, add value on their own data, and then we're able to add value to the industry as a whole, to the conversation. However, on a more, let's talk regulatory or government level, right? We do work with states as well as governments, national governments, so foreign governments, to help them understand what information infrastructure do they require to sort of set up a healthy cannabis ecosystem. We actually have an alliance called the Intercan Alliance. It's very much globally focused outside of North America. We've brought together leaders from North America, companies that have actually done this for now years and have integrity and have shown that they basically have the knowledge needed. And we brief governments on sort of like what are the necessary pillars to build a true healthy market. And it's anywhere from, in fact, the 9 pillars are policy, regulation, taxation, lab testing, compliance, data and information reporting, which is where we come in, and then standard operating procedures on cultivation, on processing, and patient education. So we sort of help bring those together from an infrastructure perspective, and then honestly, we also obviously want to be there to receive the information and then send it back out in something that's meaningful.
Yeah, and great answer. Like, I appreciate that very much. Just as both an advocate for cannabis throughout the world, really, but also an investor and all these different elements. These are the things that are so hard for us to find. I'm just looking in our live chat room as this is going as well, and a lot of people are really appreciative of the information that you're saying. They love having you on. Someone was asking for your website. I'm just going to stop right here just really quickly so that people can start checking this out. Is it newfrontierdata.com?
You got it.
Perfect. It worked out well. As I go over that over here. Well, yeah, I appreciate it really much for you coming on the show. Again, this is a show for learning about new companies, but also education. And I think a lot of people learned a little bit more about what you do. They can now find out where you are as well. I appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to come on and speak a little bit about cannabis.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take care now.
Wow.
She was great.
Yeah, she's obviously a very, very sincere individual and really is interested in providing great information. Is that a public company?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I'd have to quickly check in there because I wasn't seeing a ticker up there. It's not a public company. But that's the type of stuff, okay, a lot of people, they turn to Midas, they'll turn to Follow the Money for ourselves, they'll turn to New Cannabis Ventures, they'll turn to certain things because they're trying to learn. So as much as people love seeing the CEOs come on, it's great having them on.
Sure.
There's other elements you need to be paying attention to, because if I've learned one thing, is that I've met a lot of CEOs over the last little while, and they're always very optimistic about their company, but you have to look at the macroeconomic viewpoints of an industry. You have to look at the things that are outside. For anyone who's wondering what I'm saying, microeconomics is the one tree, macroeconomics is the forest. You got to look around you. So it's really important to find resources like that.
There's always going to be a few bad trees in the forest.
Always.
But that doesn't mean the forest is bad.
Doesn't mean the forest is bad. And that's kind of what we were talking about before, is that we're starting to see that some of these companies that were like, oh, it's going to be amazing, 3 million square feet, they're going to go on to, we're going to slowly start seeing those ones go off, unfortunately. We're going to start seeing the people
well, I think you're right. You're spot on. We're seeing it already.
Yeah.
You know,
I was expecting to see it next year, but
a lot of good ones. Chiron, Kronos has been on a wicked tear. Wicked tear.
I don't get that one. Not in a negative way. Not in a negative way. It came out of nowhere. They had some good deals put through. Don't get me wrong, but they're on fire.
A lot of money's been
right
put in
now.
that company.
They're on fire. They know how to run it. They know how to run a company in a stock. That's for sure. Well, really quickly here, we're going to Weed Stock 101. That's the segment we're about to go to.
Really?
And it's where do you start as a new investor? The second part of our Weed Stock 101 will tell you everything you need to know right now.
Class is in session, and today we're going to attempt to learn. By the way, I thought we were having more students here today.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry I'm late. Thank you for Adamo. Thank you for letting me enroll.
Geronimo?
Adamo. Thank you though. This is great. I'm excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Take a seat.
Okay, sorry I'm late.
So we're going to be looking at what are the important factors that you have to look at to determine whether or not you should invest in a company. Okay? So you've decided you want to put money into a marijuana company, and we're going to say, I'm going to tell you what you should be looking for to decide whether or not this is an investment that's worthwhile. Go ahead.
Is this going to be on the test?
This is probably going to be on the test.
Okay.
Yeah, you better pay attention.
Okay.
Okay? There's a lot of hoopla, and there's a lot of valuation that's already been determined that may not necessarily add up. So first and foremost, you have to research the management team of the company. Now, do you know what that means?
You're seeing what they've done in the past, making sure that they're up to snuff.
Like for instance, this being a new industry, it may be attracting people that have no business experience. Maybe they have a lot of pot experience, but what's that got to do with making money? Like for instance, you look like you're a bit of a pothead. Like,
yeah.
So we're researching the management team, okay? So we look at their, and in every company that's public, if you go on the internet, they'll give you a bit of a profile, okay? So you want to see, what they've done with their lives.
Is like a bio.
Exactly.
He didn't raise his hand.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, it's a small group.
Yeah.
Okay. So no raising hands, is that? I'm going to say that right.
There's a good one. That's going to be on the test too.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, put down bio.
Thanks.
So management is key. If they're business people, okay, you got a better chance if they're not business people. Is this their first rodeo? I don't mean a real rodeo. I mean, have they been involved in public companies before? Are you chewing gum again? You are, aren't you?
No.
What, would you just swallow it?
No.
Why, you're choking.
No.
Get that man a glass of water. I think you better go sit in the corner for a while.
What are you talking about? A timeout?
Time out.
Laying down the hammer. I love it.
I'm going to have a little discipline in this class.
You need it. He needs it.
Sounds like you're picking on me.
Barely.
Come on back.
Oh, great.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Because it's a new industry, it's a lot more difficult, okay? Like, you want to know, like, basically, do they have a lot of cash? Because they're going to be burning cash. And if they don't have much cash, do they have the ability to raise cash? Because if they don't have the right people, they may have difficulty raising cash. So in this sector, because it's so hot and people are throwing money at it, it's giving you a false sense, okay? Generally speaking, things don't usually end as well as they appear to look at the beginning. Okay?
So how do you figure that out? How do you figure out who's telling the truth and who's just,
Well, if you follow the news and you read the news diligently, you'll see that there's already been a lot of people fired, people that have been replaced. There's been allegations of impropriety. So why is that? Well, that's because people are putting their objectives in front of the shareholders' objectives, okay? Theoretically, because it's a public company, the shareholders are the most important group, okay? That's number one. So if you think management's objectives don't align with the shareholders' objectives, stay clear. you're going to get hurt because they control the money.
So, quick question.
Go ahead, Geronimo.
Does it? It's okay. Does it reflect? So let's say management gets rid of the problem. You know, they fix the problem, but like,
does that affect them in the long run?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it depends. I mean, look, things don't change overnight. You know, it depends on how many rotten apples there are in a barrel. Are you writing this down? What are you writing there, Geronimo?
Just drawing stuff. So I wasn't listening.
Okay, as you were.
Okay.
Is the business profitable yet? In the new industries, it's rare that companies are making money right away. A lot of these companies aren't making money, and they'll never make money, okay? So if you can find one that's throwing off cash, and there's a few of them that are right now, stick to those because it's all about the cash.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com.
And back. That was some education.
I'm learning from myself.
Sir Uncle Ed, educating the masses. Educating the masses.
Educating. Weed 101.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. You know what? Look, when money flows in quickly, and you know things really don't change that quickly, but in the early, you know, incipient stages of a new boom like the cannabis thing, a lot of money goes in, a lot of money's been made, but not everybody gets to keep it.
No.
And you got to take if you're up a lot of money and you're waiting for more, and it seems like it's getting tougher, maybe that's a signal that maybe you should take some money off the table.
Yeah, I mean, myself personally, I took a lot of money.
I know
off.
you did, and you know, to your good for you, because younger people generally haven't made the mistakes that like older people like myself have made, and you know, wisdom usually is ascribed to older people because they've been there, done that, right? So kudos to you.
Yeah, you know what? I had my moments though. I had my moments where I actually watched a six-bagger go down to almost just barely over 100% before I sold, and that's what I told myself. Why did I watch it?
6 times your money.
6 times.
When is the last time the bank's going to give you 6 times your money?
And it's that mentality. So I've been through all the swings of cannabis, and I've been burned by a lot of them. But then I finally understood at the beginning of last year. I took a lot off. I lowered my position so I could manage it better because I was up to like 25 stocks. It was ridiculous. I couldn't do that plus full time, do other things.
It's got to drive you out of your mind.
So I went back, but I put a lot into earlier private placements because you know there's an interesting thing here.
Yeah.
I spoke about it with the gentleman from not YOLO anymore. They just went over to the ticker POT, Week Unlimited. I spoke to him about a certain point though, not necessarily their company, but there was a lot of money that was made in Aurora and Canopy and those different things. Like everyone made their money. Like I had Canopy at $1.60. I made good money off of Canopy. But there's another phase right now. There's newer people coming onto market right now who didn't have to go through the growing pains that these other LPs had to fight through. They didn't have to spend all that money or go through all that dilution because now they can go to banks. A lot of the framework was already put in place. If you look for someone to grow you a cannabis facility like 3 or 4 years ago, there had been no experts anywhere. Now you can start looking and there's people who've already done like 40 of these LPs. It's a lot easier for entrants to get into this space now, but they need to be doing something specific. If someone's coming in saying, oh, we're going to have this massive facility, we're going to have this, that's taken.
Yeah.
You know, we don't necessarily need massive facilities anymore. We need people who are in niche markets. So there's lots of money still to be made. There really is. If you can get in a seed or founders round and get in really early and watch that grow, when it goes public, you're already up 4 or 5 times your money.
That's why I'm sort of interested in getting into smaller capitalization issuers with the intention that or the hope that they're going to become, you know, like if it's already coming out at a big number, a lot of the money's already been made. And if there's a lot of money been made, the people that own those shares have a tendency to sell them to take that money. So you're fighting And you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we're going to be switching over to Ben here, but just before that, in the chat rooms right now, if there's a lot of people complaining about someone named Giorgio, I've already blocked him myself personally. You can go beside his name. When you go there, there's 3 dots that are on top of each other. It's called an ellipsis. This one's in a vertical ellipsis. Click on that, click block, you'll never have to see him again. Just letting you know. Well, let's go over to Ben, who's on the line. Well, man, how you doing?
Hi, Ben.
Good. How are you doing today?
Fantastic.
Better now that we've seen you.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Ed.
So what have you been up to today? You know, it's we were talking earlier this afternoon. You know, it's an interesting time across most markets where a lot of people, you know, January was an awesome month for a lot of people. We've seen a few days of a pullback right now. I'm pretty sure everything's still red on the indices, especially the American side. S&P 500 and Dow, the last time I checked. It's almost like this awkward moment of, okay, we're almost at a doji right now, if you want to make a really bad analogy, but that's where, you know, we're in a standstill. Where are we turning after this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. We're definitely in a little bit of an awkward period. We're in a consolidation phase where we had a little bit of some FOMO action take place in the market along the spectrum, both in large caps, mid caps, small caps, you name it. Everything was running. I think our friends at New Cannabis Ventures put out some statistics, crunched the numbers, and global cannabis stocks went up 44% in January alone. Canadian cannabis was up like 36%. U.S. cannabis was up around 40%. So no question, FOMO was pervasive in the market, and we're seeing a little, pullback from that action. And of course, we have the Tier 1 earnings next week. A bunch of them, Aurora Cannabis, Canopy Growth. So, there could be a little apprehension, I think, going into that, with some of the run-ups and some of the valuations getting a little elevated again, and just people just taking profits. But the good news is, some of the technical damage has occurred in some stocks, but in other stocks it hasn't. For example, Aurora Cannabis is maintaining its February gap integrity, so it's above those levels, and it still maintains its uptrend. And Canopy Growth is as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, but no question, profit taking is sunk in.
Ben, Ed here. The S&P's down quite a bit today, but it has had by any account, a spectacular bounce. And sometimes it's said that these spectacular moves occur more in a bear market, like the vicious moves usually are contra to the main trend. Do you subscribe to that, or is that just the way it is? Like, do you feel like we're topping out here?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you can get some pretty spectacular moves on both sides. If I were to look a little bit further out, I'm not too enthusiastic about where the S&P and the Nasdaq, Dow Jones Industrial Averages are going to go as we go into the middle of this year and later this year, just because quantitative tightening is still going on, and that effectively acts as a interest rate hike in the market for every $200 billion that they drain from the market. It's like another 25 basis points, something like that. The economic growth is slowing throughout the world. Whether the U.S. actually goes in technical recession or not is in question. Probably won't happen in 2019, but yeah. So I mean, looking at the macro picture, I think you're just seeing a rally from oversold conditions. The economy is still pretty good at this moment, so there's some good headline news buoying the market. But we've seen several bellwether stocks in the U.S. get hit recently on bad earnings. Daimler Chrysler today, and a few other ones over the past few days. Apple a couple weeks ago. So investors have to be cautious here. If you're in weed stocks, you got to take that in consideration. That if the broad market doesn't do well, it's going to be an overhang on the sector as well.
Yeah, and it will be interesting as well. At the top of the hour, we were talking about how Chris Arthur is a fund manager who's part of our community. We were talking about the how this year started. And just to reiterate to you, because in case you weren't watching the very beginning of it, it was basically stating that if the December was an awful month, and January, I believe it was the first 5 days are green, and then the rest of the month is green. 27 of the last 30 years that happened, we have a green year. So you take that and you look at the fact that now we're kind of cooling off on interest rates. I think that's both the Fed and Bank of Canada both took really dovish attitudes after the last little part and didn't raise rates either. You know, when you start seeing that and you start seeing some money come in, it gives you a little bit of stability, but a lot of people I don't think are sold yet. I think a lot of people are still on that fence. Are we going to see a little bit of a pullback here, or are we going to be all systems go at least for the first, Q1, Q2?
Yeah, if you're talking about the broad markets, I'd agree with that. I mean, technically the uptrend is still very much in place, and there could definitely be more upside to be had in the coming few weeks. But there's just a lot of headwinds on the horizon in terms of global growth, in terms of China, for example, slowest growth in 30 years. They won't be able to backstop the economy if the world economy if things sort of turn south this time, like they did in 2000 and 2007, 2008. So, I think from a cannabis stock perspective, you have to take a look at the macro picture and you have to take that in consideration. Now, I think the biggest question for me going forward is if the markets start disintegrating again, if the S&P start testing December lows eventually, whether it be late March, April, May, whenever, back half of this year, will cannabis stocks hold up better because of the growth picture? The hockey stick stories throughout the sector are emerging. Will they be able to buck the broad market weakness when some of those big companies actually decline earnings, have earnings degradation, and cannabis is just taking off? Will that money flood into the cannabis sector and actually hold it up, or perhaps rise it? And will the sector be able to act essentially as a salmon against the stream and stabilize, or in fact, keep appreciating, if all hell breaks loose, quote unquote, in the broad markets later this year?
Yeah, and I think yes, I really do. I think yes. I don't think it's going to be a sector-wide. I think it's going to be specific. Because look at FANG, and people are going to be like, "Why on earth are you comparing it to FANG?" Because there's a reason. Because when you look at all of those stocks, once upon a time, you would never have guessed they'd be the juggernauts that are absolutely moving the American market, and really the North American market and Western Hemisphere, when you want to call it that. But when you're talking about the Canopies, when you're talking about Aurora, when you're talking about these massive players, I'll go on others, but I know I'll miss them anyway. The amount of money that these companies are going to start pulling in over the next 1 to 2 years as all these different systems are coming into play, as they're doing joint ventures all across the world, because the world, we have the know-how. Canada has the know-how, a lot of that, and we're able to help them globally. We're already seeing that in Germany and other areas where there's a lot of exports happening, but there's also a lot of joint ventures happening. I think when those companies really start pulling in those revenues that will shock and awe people, I think those ones can buck the trend. Is that enough to keep the whole sector up? I don't know, but I think they'll buck the trend similar to the way that Apple and those people did, because cannabis is not cheap. There's a lot of money in there, so it'll be interesting to see if I'm absolutely foolish for saying that, or if it's going to pan out in a year or so. I'll have to wait and find out.
Ben.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of the coin. I mean, obviously, when you have, if the markets degrade to a large degree, then you're going to have, margin calls throughout the system, people pulling money out of risk assets. Even gold, could lose its bid and decline to the 1,200 or a little bit below in such a liquidation scenario. So, I mean, that's why investors in WE stocks have to account for that, because it is a risk. Operational risk to their portfolio. But that being said, I agree 100%. The hockey stick curve is so pervasive. I mean, Canopy Growth, I think Rob Sands predicted within 12 to 16 months, it's going to be pulling in $1 billion of annualized revenues. Aurora Cannabis is just about to take off as well. Even companies like Wayland Group, full year 2019 earnings, with the ICC International deal especially, you're looking at 9-figure revenue haul right there. So a lot of the companies along the spectrum are going to be pulling in this, these huge revenues, and it's going to be occurring at a time where, the world economy is going to go into a a little bit of a tailspin, or a little bit of maybe that tailspin's a little bit too much there, but it's definitely going to degrade to a large degree. I mean, the bull market cycles have to end sometime, and it's, we're going on 9-10 years, second longest in history. So it's going to happen, and the fact that the Fed is easing rates now or not tightening anymore, historically has not been a predictor of, elongating the business cycle. Usually that's a predictor actually that the market is, ready to roll over. If you read guys like, David Rosenstein and his research, that's what he would tell you.
Hey, Ben, Ed here again. Lately, since about August, we've seen gold, attack on about 10% in U.S. dollars. And a lot of other currencies, it's a lot more. But, gold is, and you're hearing a lot of big names that are successful investors starting to look at gold again. And, they haven't been in that arena for a while. And so we've had, gold move up about 10%. The S&P, which was down 18% or something like that, now it's rallied back half of that. So it's sort of down. Gold is up, and I noticed the TSX Venture, if you look at a longer term chart, it looks like there may be evidence of a double bottom, and it's up about 18% off the lows. Do you see, do you subscribe to the theory if the U.S. market starts to back off, that maybe gold will continue to get a bid, because it seems to be rock solid here, like it's been quietly moving up, and it's holding that sort of psychological barrier of 1,300. And here in Canada, there's a lot of the stocks are at 100-year lows relative to in terms of value relative to the S&P.
Yeah, gold is a little bit of a tricky one. It's my position. I'm going to stick with this position for now, but it's my position that I believe gold is probably dead money right now. I'm a firm believer that the bid in gold is going to follow the cycles of 2000 and 2001 and 2007-8 recessions, where when the recession was just about to take place, gold was actually fairly weak. And it didn't really get going until about midway through the recession, near the back half of the recession, when the panic really started to kick in. Investor panic, the doom and gloom about the economy, and then you had, the Fed started talking about monetizing its balance sheet, and then there was TARP. So of course, the debasement of money, they're growing the balance sheet, from 800 billion to 4 trillion. So that's when gold really caught a bid and went on a tear for a year and a half, 2 years, and made new highs. So I could be wrong on this. Maybe, it follows a different pattern this time, but I'm going to say that gold has the potential to be sort of dead money. I know a lot of people are talking about it anecdotally and thinking that gold is really solid here. And that could be the case. I'm not going to, stake my life on this kind of call, but I think you'll really start to see gold going when talk of, reflating the balance sheets occurs, and when you really start to see doom and gloom in the economy. And that can only occur when recession is sort of, midway through, halfway through, or, near the end of it, and it really picks up, volatility picks up. I think that's when you want to purchase gold stocks, the most leveraged gold stocks you can. Big miners that haven't hedged their price to a certain level. You want to get into those.
Yeah, I noticed someone pointed out to me, I think it was Tom Meredith, who's the CEO of West Red Lake Gold. He said that the gold miner, the ETF for the juniors, which I think is GDXJ, it's had a pretty big move. Like it's had a run here. I was surprised. I hadn't been following it. Maybe that's the end of the run, right? You never know. I mean, gold's got to keep moving for these things to keep moving. That's for sure.
Well, the problem with gold is that there's so many false rallies. I mean, if you were to count on two hands how many false rallies gold has had over the past, 4 or 5 years, it's incredible. I mean, you get these $150, $200 rallies, and then they sink back. It never really seems to break the 1350, 1400 marks. So again, no cycle is the same, but so I could be wrong here. No cycle is the same.
I know. We're just having a friendly discussion.
Yeah. I know you're not. You're not pinning a call or asking me to pin a call right now. But I'm going to stick with my original thesis that gold is going to follow the 2001 recession and 2007-8 recessionary periods, where you want to buy in when the recession takes place and when talk of global balance sheet reflation starts happening. It wasn't just the Fed in 2008; it was also the ECB that went large into the reflation trade, quantitative easing, and they only stopped in December. So I mean, this went on for a long time, and I think you want to see that happening. You want to see people panic that the Fed isn't going to unwind the balance sheet to say $2 trillion, that they're going to put the brakes on and say, you know what, to save the economy, we're going to need another $3, $4, $5 billion. We're going to inject our balance sheet with even more money to prevent a recession. And I think that's when gold is going to start taking off.
Yeah. Well, hey, appreciate very much, Ben, coming on and having a chat there. And I agree with you. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, but there's an election next year, so I don't know if they're going to allow themselves to go into recession during that time. So we'll have to wait and see, though. If you're a pure economist, yes, we need to contract. If you're a politician, never. And unfortunately, those two don't go well together.
All right, thanks guys.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Nice seeing you.
Yeah, it's funny, eh? Economics is one of the things that I studied in school, and it's amazing that...
You actually went to those classes?
Oh, yeah. Economics was my favorite thing in school. Economics and finance. I absolutely love both those courses. It's really... It's very important for people to have at least a basic understanding of how the world around them works, how currencies work, how interest rates work. And it's funny because the Fed wants to fight inflation, so that they're raising the interest rates up because, one, they're close to a liquidity trap. You can't have your interest rates that low because then you can't go even lower to help you out. Look at Japan; they've been having that problem for the last 2 decades. But you want it to. That's one of your tools to affect inflation. Inflation right now is very high. It's well above our 3%, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken on that, though. But that's why they want to be able to use the interest rate for that. But a politician, they're only in term for so long.
I know.
So they constantly want to say, I made the most jobs, I have the most money, I made the most cuts. That can't keep happening.
They got
it can't
say the most bullshit in the shortest period of time.
And that's why each person keeps passing the buck. It was the conservatives' fault. It was the Republicans' fault. It was the Democrats. It was the liberals. No, it's human nature. They're all trying to get reelected. And it's just not sexy to fix the economy. So will we get over that? I don't think so. I don't think ever.
It's okay.
But on other news, we move on.
Yeah, we move on.
We're 2 minutes away from close. How is this power hour going? What's going on here?
You know what? I want to mention a couple, not to just, but we had a couple of interviews in the last little while. We interviewed Victor Cantori of Amex Exploration. He's drilling a very, very prospective property in Quebec. And that stock was, I think, when I first started finding out about it, it was around 20 cents, 21 cents. It's trading at 60 cents today. Wow. Good structure. Victor's famous for the Nemaska. He had the property that eventually Nemaska took over, and they've raised $1 billion, and they're putting in a mine. Maybe they've raised more. I don't know. But AMX, I'm going to just, I want to get these 2 charts up if that's okay.
It is okay by me. Ed, absolutely. You go for it.
You're the man.
the voice in my ear might tell me other things at some times, but for me, yeah, you're good to go.
AMX is, they're in this. So here's a chart here, and look at back in. This wasn't long ago. So he was on the show somewhere in here, I believe. And they're pulling some very, very high grade bonanza style gold. Now we're at 60 cents. There's only 30, well, maybe there's 45 million shares. So even say 50 million shares. So it's capped at 30 million. But they came out with a hole last week and here, and it was high grade, but narrow width. I thought it was going to sell off. It starts selling off, and I see some insiders buying the stock. If you go to Canadian Insider, always a good sign to see insiders buy the stock. And I got one other chart here I want to put up because we just had this guy on. We had the Geo of Argo Gold, ARQ.
That's the bell, 4 o'clock. It's done. Your trades are over for today. You can stop now.
CNX, and I just noticed this because, yeah, look at this thing. This thing hit 30 cents today. I think that's an all-time high. He was on earlier in the week. Yeah, I'd pay attention to these are both these companies don't have a lot of shares outstanding. They're both in areas where elephants are found, and you can go back to our website and see these interviews, and they should be watched.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. That's a little bit more education for you, the viewer. It's all for you. A little bit for me too, because I learn every single time we talk, my man. Every time. But where are you right now, personally? Do you have anything left in cannabis, or are you strictly going over to mine? You're very bullish on copper.
You know what? I'm very bullish on copper. Like because of my age and because of my experience, I want to go into those areas that nobody wants and wait it out to some degree. I mean, I can't wait forever, but I like I own the stocks I just mentioned. I own Crown Mining. I don't have any cannabis stocks. I'd like to trade them. I'd like to see overbought, oversold, and trade accordingly. I don't want to be. I have a hard time believing that. I look at it. I say, okay, maybe there's going to be a lot of growth, but there's been such growth already in the numbers. If you add up all the companies, tell me what the market cap is. And other countries, they're going to say, well, why don't we do that? And they're going to come in, and it's just going to be more and more difficult. But I noticed some good moves, like Kronos was up today, Emerald Health was up today, Chiron was up. I think Chiron might have been down a bit, but well over what they...
Yeah, we had Heritage up 14%. Canna, I've been watching that one's been all over the place.
That's the CANN?
Yeah, so funny enough, CANN is up 14%, just under, and CNA, Canna, is up 15%. A few double-digit losers as well. We had MPXI, that's the new SpinCo from MPX and Nianthus. We had some sellers there. It's down almost 13%. Ascent, that's been going crazy, or Ascent, sorry. ASNT, it's down 26% today. That's a large chunk there.
Yeah, and you know, like in the past when we saw these things
almost
running,
down 8%.
They were moving together. They're not moving as together anymore. There seems to be...
I like divergence. I like that though. I like it because there are some people who like it's like if something happens in the United States and then all of a sudden all the cannabis companies in Canada go down. Like it has very close to no correlation between the two. Or something happens to a grower and then all of a sudden people start selling their extraction player. I think what we're going to get is we're going to get smarter investors. Not that they weren't smart individuals. They're just learning the space a little bit more. I think you're going to really start seeing this divergence more and more where people are going to be able to say, hey, wait a second, that person is making this product for that much cheaper and selling it for this much more and getting this much. They'll actually have things to measure. Up until now, we've pretty much had kilograms, how many kilograms they're growing, and what's the square footage of their facility, and do they have supply deals? We have like 3 metrics that we're going on. We're starting to get a little bit more as we go on. And coming on the show really quickly, actually, is a gentleman who will speak a lot more because he's actually an analyst in the cannabis space, where that's his specialty. So we'll be able to ask those types of questions to him very shortly. But to the viewers who are in there, we've got a few minutes before that happens. What different cannabis companies or mining companies are you looking at? Put it in the chat room. We're reading it. We'll see if we know anything about it. We'll talk about it if we do.
You mentioned CANN, and I just got the chart up, and I want to point something out on it. If you don't, if we can get the chart up. Now look at this. Look at that right there. Look at that level of resistance. We're approaching it. If we get through that, and look at the volume today. That's as big a volume day. 8 million shares. This stock's on fire. This stock has now moved from 15, 16, 17 cents a couple months ago, or a month ago, 2 months ago, a couple months, and it's doubled. It's doubled. I'm not that familiar with this company, but I think James is. I think James knows quite a bit about it. So some are really, really performing, and others, and we saw Oxley earlier, and both big market caps backing off.
Yeah, I'm just looking right now if there's news, because I've showed you this before, right? Our chat rooms. Look at this. They can't see it, but you can see it. You just go in here in Cannabis News, and you get all of the Cannabis News from all the days. So I'm just looking through.
Right.
Yeah, you can put it on the screen, actually, as my ear says it. But this is, so we were just talking about Ascent. I didn't know why it was going down. Well, Ascent just had their update on here. So why don't we click on that really quickly here. Because this update will probably tell us about, they were the ones who, I believe they were in trouble with Health Canada for possibly selling to people that weren't in the system, like selling illegally. I believe that to be the case. And they're down 27%, so I wouldn't be surprised. I'll read that during our next break.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is them saying their license is suspended farther. But I won't read it because I want to make sure I don't get that wrong. But yeah, no, it's interesting to see these different players doing what they're doing, which directions they're going to go. And a lot of people are saying, cannabis is done. I think that is so false and so misleading.
Yeah.
What's done is throwing a dart against the wall and getting a two-bagger out just because.
Instead of a major cycle or a major, it's now more of a stock pickers game.
Yeah.
You can't just indiscriminately buy any one. You've got to pick one. If it's not doing well, maybe you should avoid it. Like if something's doing well, maybe you take an initial position and wait for a pullback and then add to it. Yeah. Because clearly some are really performing well. Look at this Kronos. It's had about a $7 swing to the downside. Look at today; it's back up to $2.50.
Yeah. Absolutely. So really quickly here, because I asked that question, so we're going to turn back to the chat rooms here. First off, 79 Wild, he did my job. I brought up that news release, but didn't want to take the time reading through it while we were on air. It's because Ascent has updated that Health Canada is still going to shut them down, so they're losing their license. They have until February 20th to supply more information.
And where are they based?
That'll do it.
Where are they based?
I do not know.
Okay.
I do not know. They not to say anything rude, they never had anything that really stood out to me. And now, it came to a point before where you needed to find the winners, and that's still true. But at the same time, these companies, it's such a almost a vicious sector right now with everyone trying to do the same thing. It's up to them to really get their name out there for me to find them. So that's one thing there. So I haven't looked much into them. OGI is the only one you like in a moment. OGI is actually a very good company. They're getting their license back. Charlotte's Web in the United States. That'll really, I'm just going through the list here in the chat room.
That's had a big run.
Yeah, and that's going to do well because of the Farm Bill going through the United States. CXXI, that's one that I currently own. I got it at 85 cents.
What's the ticker there?
That's what I was showing you earlier today.
CSXI,
C21 Investment. I think they are going to wow people come the end of March, I think is when they're going to be having their quarter. That's when they're going to have that silver state or silver view. I mix up the word, but that's when they're getting that $24 million and 12-month trailing revenue put onto the first quarter, because they'll have owned them during that time. CanTrust, always have enjoyed them. Canopy Rivers, they just got another huge investment from Canopy. They're going to do well. Eanthus, fantastic. Used to own them at $2. Wish I didn't sell them. Oxley, we spoke about them earlier today. And keep going before we get our next guest on. And then Boss, that is High Yield Corp. We had her on the show. They keep coming up with new products, so that should be an interesting one as well.
Where does CSXI trade? Is it
CXXI. It's on the CNX. That's out in the States. But while you're looking up, we are at the time now where we are going over to our last and final guest for the afternoon. Joining us live from Vancouver is Jason Zandberg, Special Situations Analyst at PI Financial Corp. How are you doing today, my good man?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And, myself and Ed have been talking about what's been happening in the market all throughout today, and especially in the cannabis space. But this is somewhere where you specialize in. What have you seen the last little while, and where are your thoughts right now on the situation of the cannabis space?
Yeah, there's definitely been a huge number of companies that have gone public in the last year, and quite honestly, it's you definitely have to look at the quality of these companies, because there are a lot of either Me Too companies or companies that really don't have a lot behind them. So due diligence is extra important right now.
Absolutely. You actually cannot emphasize that even more. One of the topics we've been talking about all afternoon is that a lot of these companies, even with good intentions, I think a lot of them, when you're going to start seeing it the latter parts of this year, especially next year, are unfortunately not going to meet their milestones. They're not going to keep going, and you will start seeing some delinquencies and some people falling off. So it really, really is important to pick the right ones. On that exact note, are there a few LPs that currently stand out to you as those companies that you do think will pass the test of time?
Yeah, well, I've been looking at some of the names that have been outperforming in the rec market. When I say outperforming, I mean, we've got a fairly good track record of those that have been selling medicinal cannabis for a few years. And the names that really stand out when after the rec launch for me is Organigram and Supreme Cannabis. So two that are not in the top tier at this point, but getting great reviews, being able to execute and get products to market, and I think there'll be some nice surprises here coming up in earnings.
Yeah, I've always been a really big fan of Supreme Cannabis Company, OGI. I'm liking to see that they've made a lot of progress since the 2017 or maybe even 16 now. Time flies by. But with Fire, they've, even on a charting perspective, they've really been crawling back, because they were in the low or high ones, mid ones for a while there. I think at last check they had just breached $2 and by a little bit. That'll be an interesting one. You're thinking that the rec market's going to have a big reflection on their next quarter?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They've been getting great reviews on their Zhangyi and Wapa strains, and just being able to, they have actually outperformed at the later stage of the medical market. They don't get enough credit for that, and we expect that the numbers to climb. We're looking for about 9 million in sales now. That's a pretty high bar for them to reach, but we think they can do it. And they'll release their earnings next week.
Well, looking forward to seeing that, see if they are able to meet that number there. When it comes to the United States, obviously a lot of heads have turned their focus over there. Are there certain things for yourself that really stand out to you? Are there certain companies that you think maybe a diamond in the rough, or just in general, not enough people are looking at them?
Yeah. No, the U.S. is a very interesting market in that it's every state has got its own licensing rules and product, what products can be sold or can't be sold. So, it takes a lot of, again, due diligence to try to identify what are some of the great states to be invested in. Right now, we're very fond of the Florida market, not only just the sheer size of its population, but the fact that recently they have overturned the smoking ban on cannabis. So initially they had said that it would only be concentrates and and oils that would be sold, and essentially banned any smokable cannabis. Most states are about 50% of the product. If they provide both category types, about half of it's smokable cannabis. So we think that this is actually going to be a nice boost for Florida. Furthermore, in Florida, I really believe that we can see that medical market go to a rec market, possibly in 2020, but more likely in 2022. But that's a pretty quick turn from going from medical to rec, and we just think that the upside is huge for that state. So some of the names that we like in Florida, Trulieve is the leader in terms of sales. They've got 24 locations that are open right now. And we also like Ianthus, which are just starting to open up their dispensaries right now.
Yeah, and with Trulieve, that's actually one that caught myself off guard personally, because they came onto the scene and they had some really, really great revenues, and like you said, specifically in the medical side of cannabis. Was it not recently? It could have been even this week or last week that they won. They were overturned something because there was a limit for how many dispensaries you can have, and I believe they won that, and they're allowed opening more. Do you know more about that?
Yeah, so Florida, when they initially launched their medical program, they didn't have a limit to how many locations you could open. They essentially assigned licenses to regions. So Trulieve had opened up 14 locations. And then after that, at that point, they set a cap to, at the time it was 25 locations, and then they increased to 30 once the patient count increased. So Trulieve felt this was unfair. The fact that they had an early lead actually hampered them, because if they would have known right off the start that they could only have 25 locations, they would have picked more high volume locations. But as you mentioned, a judge did rule in their favor this week, and essentially said that they should be able to do 14 plus the 30. So 14 that they had originally opened, and then 30 after the regulations changed. So there still has to be legislation to push that forward, but we're optimistic, and we believe that Trulieve will be able to open up more locations. And regardless, I believe that the repeal on the smoking ban will actually increase the patient count, which in turn will increase the number of available licenses per license holder, or number of locations per license holder.
Yeah, and that's something a lot of people turn to various ways of consuming cannabis, and I was always surprised. Somewhere out in I think it's the UK as well, had come on, and they are stating pretty much the same thing that Florida was just before that, that you're not allowed smoking, you have to take it in other means, but certain cannabinoids are only activated when you do heat it past that time, and you are actually smoking it. So it's a sticky situation there, but no pun intended. But I didn't mean for that one there. But it's really nice to hear certain players really making a push, because in the States, again, a lot of people are really not paying attention to these MSOs, and they're really, really not understanding that, yes, you can't export, but you certainly can go in some of the largest states and the largest economy in the world. Are there any other players throughout the United States that you think are either a diamond in the rough, or ones that you're watching for certain milestones to happen with?
Yeah, no, we like the MSO model in the U.S. and a lot of these names, like the Curaleaf and the Harvest and GTIs have all got acreage of, all got $2 to $5 billion market caps. We're looking at a few that are under that limit that we believe will have some good momentum moving forward. Ianthus, which we talked about, is one of our favorite names. Now that they've merged with MPX, they've got a great footprint across the U.S., both the eastern seaboard as well as west with MPX assets, and that's trading at about 1.5 billion market cap. So we do believe that it should become one of those top tier MSOs. Another name that we like, which is very much on much smaller side, is MRDean. They really had their start in Colorado, and I know the market doesn't like Colorado place, given that you have to set up these odd structures to essentially absorb all the profits. But we do expect that to change at some point, and we believe that they've got a great management team, and are really, they're not getting into bidding wars for dispensaries. They're really thinking logically about where they want to place pins in the map and not overpaying. So we like that discipline.
Yeah, it's an important one.
Jason, Ed Milewski here. Care to comment on the any comments on the Namaste legal battles that sort of came to light this week?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've never, I haven't covered Namaste, so,
okay.
I've read the headlines and read some of the stories, but not really close to the situation, so it'd be unfair for me to make a comment.
Okay.
No problem. Going back on that original point, though, it is important to start looking for companies that aren't overpaying for things, because there's some companies that are coming out with some great deals for a fraction of the price.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at the difference between buying a license and actually applying and earning a license, I mean, there's a huge difference. And we prefer those obviously that can earn their licenses, but if they can't, try not to overpay, because some of the valuations on licenses have been extremely high, which, we really don't think that there'll be it'll be difficult to get a strong ROI on some of those investments.
All right.
Well, I appreciate very much for your time, taking the time to come on and speak about these, because it's, again, as a lot of these stocks are starting to cool off from those January, some great runs in January.
Yeah.
Now's the time to start really looking into who are going to be the players, who are the people who are going to really push forward. So I appreciate very much for you coming on the show and giving us your time to talk about a few that you believe in.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Take care.
Interesting. Yeah, I know some of the guys down in that office down in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah, good guys.
Yeah, it's nice to see a lot of these firms really starting to understand what they're doing and then putting their understanding of their sector, or whether they're in finance, whether they're in economics, whether they're for the longest time, with these people say that they're experts, but you're expert in your field. You know nothing about cannabis. You know nothing about how that sector works. And then you had people who were experts in cannabis but had no idea about marketing and had no idea about retail sales. And you're starting to see it finally morph. I think it's been happening for a while, but you're really starting to see that come out now, where you're getting an expert in a field who's also making themselves an expert in cannabis. Putting those two together, now we're going to start having some of these analysts and hopefully our news publications come up with stuff that I'll actually listen to, and that sounded like it was.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've tried to ask him. I was thinking about, what really stands out in terms of something that's, prohibitively overvalued in terms of market cap. But maybe we don't want to go down that road.
It goes into what? So I was reading one of our chats there.
Like some we're talking about undervalued, but some of that are overvalued. I'm not trying to really pick on anybody. Everybody's entitled to do the best they can, but some of these letters that come out from the States and say this thing, the Kronos thing, I found astounding, because it was picked by the Citron, yeah, Citron. But look at it's done nothing but act like a rocket ship escaping Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, let's be real here. A lot of these companies, I learned very quickly, and this is not to have anything to do with Cron.
You're talking about a general statement.
Point. There are a lot of shitty companies with great stocks, and a lot of great companies with shitty stocks.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because there's a game being played. Don't ever think that there's not. One way or another, there's a game played. We're all pawns in this. We're all working at it. There's the institutions, there's the traders, there's the investors, there's the people who want to go into private placements, there's the people who want to day trade. We're all part of the same game. You have to understand that there are when certain people get together and they've got a great marketing team, they've got a great capital markets team, they've got some nice news releases, they can make things really, really rocket, and everyone's feeling good about it. You got to watch out though, because I think there's a lot of overvalued companies. But I'm not a financial advisor, so I won't name them myself.
But look at
there are a lot of them. Got to be smart.
YOLO won the lottery for the name POT.
Yeah, the ticker. Yeah.
And the stock was 11 cents on Thursday, a week ago. Friday, we came in and it was up to 20, maybe hit 27, 28, hit 35 beginning of the week, 36, and I think now it's back to 20. I'm just making a comment. I know some of the people involved, and it's amazing to me what moves a stock. And some of these movements are so large.
Yeah.
I really can't say that's a fundamental change in the business.
No, and that's what I was going to get to the point there. Did changing that ticker have any extra value? Right. Now, again, I bet them as well, and I like my conversation with I'm trying to think of his name now, who was on here. I saw him with that's the CEO. Yes.
Yeah.
But I like the company. There's stuff that's going on there, so it's got nothing to do with that. But you have to ask yourself, even if going on the Nasdaq. So when these companies are going on Nasdaq, you get more liquidity. There's more eyes. But did that mean that company is now 100% more valuable? Arguably not. You know, and the thing is, though, is that so many people
looks pretty easy, though, doesn't it? Like, what we should all have companies and get their name changed.
Well, it's crazy, right? And I think people, it's such a herd mentality. And what we keep trying to tell our investors in our community is that you need to be mindful that you are in a game. There's real companies, but this is a game.
Yeah.
And there are people trying to manipulate you both ways at all times. At all times.
Yeah.
Some people are doing it in a great way because they're showing that this company truly is undervalued. They're doing great things. And you know what? Yeah, find those stories. Those are awesome. Other people are using social media platforms. They're using Stockhouse. They're using Twitter. They're using CEO.ca. They're using the Financial Post. They're using the Globe and Mail. They're using these different elements to push a certain narrative. But it's just all too convenient how quickly that narrative changes and how you guarantee there are people above you and I who are making money on both ways. So just be mindful. When everyone else is panicking and is in fear, maybe you should be buying.
Yeah, well,
when everyone's too happy, maybe you should be selling.
You know, buy to the sounds of cannons.
Not advice.
Buy to the sounds of cannons and sell to the sounds of trumpets. And look, every time you get that RSI hit, like, you know, you say, well, it's 75, but let's say it gets, some of these things get to 80, 85. They just, nothing I've ever seen goes in one direction. And and people are so sophisticated now that if there's a big short position, it could precipitate a short cover. Like, you know, the shorts start to cover. It's one of the, if you're short a stock and it starts to rally, it's one of the scariest things because there's no end in sight.
Well, it's funny, and then just like the terminology I was saying, that's a game everyone's playing it. Well, if people are shorting it, that's another aspect of the game.
Oh, and there are people out there just looking to short. They see a big move and they're pounding it like they're.
Yeah. So you got to understand that those are, it's a part of the market. You're not going to get away from it until regulations get away from it. If they deem that it shouldn't be a part of the market, like naked shorting. I don't believe in naked shorting. And a lot of our algorithms, I think we need to rehaul algorithms immensely. But you have to understand that there's other people out there doing these different things, and there's nothing wrong with shorting. There's nothing wrong with day trading. There's nothing wrong with momentum playing. There's nothing wrong with investing long. Those are all different ways of investing. Just know the other elements, though, and don't be swayed into their games, because a lot of them are games. That's the problem. That's what most retail investors lose on, is they don't realize that it's a game. They think everything's fair for everyone. It's not. You're a retail investor. It's not fair for you. That is what it is.
It's not about fair.
The sky is blue. Retail investors don't. It's not fair for you. I get it. But we can make money if you understand what the others are trying to do and help play their game against them. Be aware of it.
Probably the one thing I would say, and I was reading this on some commentary on the internet, that if you can force yourself to take small losses, if you're a trader, and do it easily, stick to your stops and cut your losses quickly and let your profits run. That's one of the rules that's so difficult to follow, because a lot of times when you're a trader, you take your losses, you take your gains quickly, and you're afraid to take a loss because you're admitting you're wrong. But you have to admit you're wrong in order to be a successful trader.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the saying? No one's ever gone broke taking profits.
Yeah.
It's true. You know how many times I've especially recently too, where you're trading or you're in an investment and you see it go up 30-40% in the matter of a week. And so a lot of people in cannabis are thinking to themselves, well, no, I want more.
More is a mug's game.
But even if you sell that and it goes up another 100%, you still made 40%. Most people will die for 40% in a year. Learn to take profits, learn to have some sort of a code. Everyone is different, but this really stemmed from the whole aspect. I think we're just ranting. I don't know where it stemmed from, but I'm pretty sure it started with the whole aspect of be mindful of the media that's out there. Be mindful of us. We're human. We might be too optimistic about things at first. You always just take it as a grain of sand. You start talking with other people. You find a community to speak with, and you learn and you build your own program that's right for your own personal financial needs.
Well, what time is it?
That was a perfect segue. I was playing that because we got like 30 seconds left.
30?
Yeah, I was slowly going into that too.
Well, another day, hopefully another dollar.
Well, another day, another dollar, another show. And that next show is going to be David. He's coming on from AltaCorp Capital. We've got Darcy Bomford, CEO of True Leaf Medicine, and Chuck Smith, CEO of Dixie Brands. They've been doing a lot of things in this last little while as well. So we're going to be having them on the show tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't know who's hosting it. I am not. Are you here tomorrow?
I'm here.
Ed's here tomorrow, folks. We know half the story.
Yeah, we know.
And Ben is hosting. I love this thing that speaks in my ear.
Good.
Where we get this knowledge. So for everyone who tuned in, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed our banter, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day as well. Take care.
See you later.